There was a moment years ago when everything felt uncertain, when the world felt heavy, the options felt limited, and the future didn't look like a place that held much promise. You've probably had moments like that, moments where you didn't know how things would turn out, where you questioned whether you even had the strength to shape your own destiny. But in the middle of that chaos, something happened, something small, something unbelievably simple, and yet it changed everything. It began with hunger, not just the physical hunger of an empty stomach, but the emotional hunger of wanting more out of life. Wanting to feel seen, to feel worthy, to feel like the future was bigger than the circumstances you were born into. When life presses you that hard, you start believing maybe the world doesn't care. Maybe people don't care. And then a knock on the door. A stranger stood there, someone who owed nothing, expected nothing, and yet carried something priceless as kindness. Not a grand act, not a speech, not a rescue mission, just food, just a gesture, just love expressed in the simplest, most human form. In that moment, everything shifted. Because when you receive something you didn't expect, when life shows you generosity you didn't think you deserved, it does something deep inside you. It reaches into that part of your soul that's been dormant, the part that's been waiting to wake up. That small act of kindness didn't just feed a body, it fed a belief. It planted the idea that people are good, that life can change, that you can rise, not because everything is perfect, but because someone showed you what's possible. And here's the truth most people overlook. Destiny is often shaped by the moments that seem insignificant. We think transformation comes from massive events, dramatic breakthroughs, extreme circumstances. But often it's the small things, the unexpected smile, the help in hand, the gentle word, the generosity that wasn't required, that changed the direction of a life. That moment sparked a decision to never let hunger, physical, emotional, or spiritual, define the future again. A decision to build a life where giving wasn't an occasional act but a way of being. Because when someone touches your life through kindness, it creates a responsibility to pass it forward, to use your pain as a bridge, not a wall. And maybe you've had a moment like that too, a moment when someone showed up for you, when someone believed in you, when someone gave you a reason to keep going. If you haven't had it yet, let me tell you something: you can be that moment for someone else. And in doing so, you often become it for yourself. Kindness is not weakness. It's power. It's influence. It's leadership. It's the ability to change the emotional climate of another, a human being with nothing more than intention. When you give, you're not losing anything. You're multiplying who you are. The trajectory of a life was altered because one person decided to care. Not for applause, not for recognition, but because compassion is the highest form of contribution. And that small moment became the fuel for creating a life of impact, of service, of growth, of abundance. That single act of kindness became a reminder that no one is limited by their circumstances, only by the story they continue to tell themselves. And when you experience real kindness, it forces you to rewrite that story. It forces you to ask, what else is possible for me? So here is the question for you. What small act of kindness can you offer today? Not next week, not someday, today. Whose life can you touch? Because you never know whose entire destiny is waiting on the other side of your decision to care. Kindness created momentum. Momentum created opportunity. Opportunity created transformation. And transformation created a life that once seemed impossible. Never underestimate the power of a small act of love. It can feed more than a body. It can feed a future. A small act of kindness can rewrite the destiny of a person who feels hopeless. And when you look closely at how transformation actually begins in someone's life, you realize it's rarely because of some massive external event, but rather because of a moment that pierces through the darkness just enough to remind them that life still holds possibilities. Imagine a person standing at the edge of emotional exhaustion where they've pushed and struggled and fought, yet it feels like every door is locked and every path is blocked. In that state, the mind begins to shrink. Hope becomes a luxury. Dreams begin to feel like stories other people get to live. And yet in that low place, there's a kind of sensitivity, a rawness, a deeper part of the soul waiting for even the smallest sign that things can change. That's why kindness matters so profoundly. Not because it solves everything instantly, but because it interrupts the pattern of despair long enough for a new pattern to start forming. Imagine someone who has spent days or weeks believing they're invisible, believing no one notices their struggle, believing the world is too busy or too self-involved to care. Then suddenly, someone shows up. Maybe it's just a small gesture, a meal, a smile, a hand extended at the exact moment they're about to fall emotionally. The act itself may last only seconds, but what happens inside the person receiving it is far more significant. They begin to question the narrative they've been living in. They start thinking, maybe I'm not alone. Maybe life isn't as cold as I thought. Maybe I matter more than I realized. This shift is subtle, but it's powerful because destiny isn't rewritten in giant strokes. It's rewritten in micro moments where belief gets altered. When belief changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, life changes. Kindness has the unique ability to bypass the defenses people build around their pain. When someone is struggling, they often carry shame, disappointment, or a fear of being judged. They don't want pity. They don't want to be seen as broken. But kindness isn't pity. It's a message that says, oh, I see you. I care. You're worth something. That message, delivered at the right moment, becomes a catalyst. It awakens a spark. It reminds them of their own humanity, their own potential, and their own value. And once a person starts to believe again, even just a little, the direction of their life begins to shift. Think about how many great transformations in history, in personal stories, in everyday lives began because someone received kindness at the exact moment they needed it. Not kindness that was planned or strategic, but kindness that was natural, instinctual, human. There's something incredibly empowering about realizing that one simple gesture, a gesture that might feel insignificant to the giver, can become the defining moment in someone else's journey. It's the reminder they carry with them when they decide to get back up, when they decide to fight again, when they decide they're not done yet. What's even more profound is that the person who receives kindness often carries that moment with them for the rest of their life. It becomes a reference point. Whenever they face challenges in the future, whenever they feel themselves slipping back into doubt or fear, they remember that moment. They remember that someone cared. And because someone cared, they find the strength to keep moving, to keep growing, to keep believing. That memory becomes a kind of internal fuel, a quiet flame that never completely goes out. And eventually what happens is something even more beautiful. They start giving that same kindness to others. Not because they're trying to repay a debt, but because they understand firsthand the power it holds. They know what it feels like to be lifted at the exact moment they were sinking. They know what it feels like to be reminded of their worth. So they pass it forward to family, to strangers, to people who look like they're holding themselves together, but are quietly breaking inside. And in doing so, they shape destinies, just like theirs was shaped. They become a carrier of the same light that once helped them see again. This is how one small act of kindness doesn't just change a moment, but changes a life. And how one changed life goes on to change many more. Because kindness isn't just a gesture, it's a seed, and once planted, it grows in ways you can never fully predict, influencing choices, creating new opportunities, inspiring new strengths, and ultimately rewriting the path of someone who once believed their future was fixed. Receiving unexpected generosity creates a shift in identity and awakens a new belief in possibility. And this happens in a way most people never notice because on the surface it looks like just a kind gesture, a moment of humanity, something small and forgettable. But for the person who receives it, especially someone who's been carrying the weight of struggle or feeling like life has been working against them, that moment hits on a much deeper level. It reaches into the part of them that has been questioning their worth, questioning their path, questioning whether anything they do actually makes a difference. When someone gives without expecting anything in return, it disrupts the internal story that says, I'm alone, or people don't care, or nothing good ever happens to me. Suddenly, the world feels different, and when the world feels different, you start believing differently about yourself. Imagine someone who's been grinding, working, trying to keep it together, and inside they're slowly breaking. They don't talk about it. They don't tell anyone. They just push through because they think that's what strength looks like. But inside they're starving for reassurance, starving for proof that life isn't indifferent. Then one day, someone notices them, not because they asked for help, not because they cried out, but simply because another human being chose to act from a place of compassion. Maybe it's a meal, maybe it's a ride, maybe it's a moment of understanding, maybe it's a small gift that carries big meaning. And in that instant, something shifts. They begin to feel seen. They begin to feel worthy. They begin to feel like possibility isn't as far away as they thought. Moments like this don't just create gratitude, they create identity change. That's the part most people miss. Because identity isn't shaped by what you think casually, it's shaped by what you feel deeply. When generosity enters your life unexpectedly, it reaches the emotional core, the part of you that decides who you are and what you're capable of becoming. You start to think differently about your future because someone else already believed in your value without needing proof. That kind of validation is powerful. It's like a door opening inside your mind that says, if someone sees more in me, maybe I should too. And when that door opens, possibility rushes in. Suddenly, the limits you thought were fixed begin to loosen. The fears that felt so heavy begin to lighten. The belief that nothing can change begins to crack, and light leaks through the cracks. You start imagining a different kind of future, not because the circumstances changed instantly, but because your internal narrative began to evolve. You feel a kind of emotional permission to dream again, to hope again, to try again, and that permission came from an act of giving that wasn't calculated or strategic, but purely human. And there's something else that happens, something subtle but profound. You begin to aspire to be the kind of person who gives the way you were given to. It's almost automatic. When someone lifts you at a moment when you didn't think you could rise, you carry that feeling with you. It becomes a quiet vow, one day I'll do this for someone else. And that vow becomes part of your identity. You're no longer just someone who received generosity, you're someone who intends to create it. That's how identity shifts, from seeing yourself as someone trying to survive to seeing yourself as someone who can contribute, someone who matters, someone who can make a difference. The belief in possibility gets awakened because generosity sends a powerful message: life can change in an instant. Not always through luck, not always through opportunity, but through human connection. When someone gives to you unexpectedly, it breaks the illusion that everything good has to be earned through suffering. It shows you that you're allowed to receive, and receiving is often the first step toward deserving, and deserving is the first step toward believing you're capable of creating more. That's how the inner narrative transforms from "why me?" to "why not me?" And once that shift begins, everything else follows. Decisions get bolder, risks feel more manageable, goals become clearer. You start acting from a place of worth rather than survival. You start showing up differently in the world, not because someone changed your life entirely, but because someone changed the way you saw yourself. Unexpected generosity does that. It awakens the belief that you deserve to grow, that you deserve to rise, that you deserve to experience more than what your past has offered. And when that belief takes root, it becomes the foundation for a new identity, one built on possibility, gratitude, and the desire to become a source of light for others, just as someone became a source of light for you. Transformation often begins with simple, seemingly insignificant moments, and what's fascinating is how rarely we recognize their power while they're happening. We tend to believe that change requires big events, dramatic breakthroughs, or massive shifts in circumstance, but in reality, the turning points that shape a person's life often come wrapped in experiences so small they're almost invisible. It might be a conversation, a gesture, a comment someone makes without thinking twice. It might be a moment of kindness, a moment of clarity, a moment when your heart is cracked open just enough for something new to enter. These moments don't announce themselves. They don't come with bright lights or warning signs. They slip quietly into your life and alter the direction of everything that comes after. Think about times when you've changed in your own life. It probably wasn't because someone handed you a perfectly organized plan or because the world suddenly delivered you the ideal set of circumstances. It was most likely because something shifted inside you. Maybe you heard a sentence at the right moment, or someone looked at you with belief when you had none. Maybe you experienced a small act of compassion that caught you off guard. The moment itself didn't look dramatic, but what it triggered within you was. Because transformation is more emotional than logical. It's about the meaning you attach to the moment, not the moment itself. When someone is struggling, when they feel stuck, when they've been living with the weight of fear or uncertainty, they often expect that the solution has to be as big as the problem. They wait for the perfect opportunity, the perfect timing, the perfect answer. But what actually creates change is the spark, not the fire. The spark is something tiny, something almost forgettable, but it's enough to ignite the flame of possibility. Once that flame is there, the person starts seeing things differently. They start believing differently. They start acting differently, and that's when the fire grows. There's something powerful about realizing that the world can shift from a single moment. A stranger's kindness, a mentor's encouragement, a moment of gratitude that appears in the middle of chaos. A decision to stand up after falling one more time. These aren't grand events. These are human moments, and yet these moments have changed the course of families, careers, destinies. The moment someone decides they're worth more. The moment someone refuses to return to the life they've outgrown. The moment someone chooses courage instead of comfort. Each of those decisions is born from something small, a feeling, a gesture, a thought that lands deep enough to echo. The beauty of these seemingly insignificant moments is that they bypass resistance. When something is small, you don't fight it. You accept it. You absorb it. You allow it to touch you because it doesn't feel threatening, it feels natural. And once it touches you, it begins working inside you in ways you can't always see immediately. You wake up the next day and something is different. Maybe you stand a little taller. Maybe you feel a little stronger. Maybe for the first time in a long time, you feel a little more hopeful. And you can't pinpoint why exactly, but you know something inside you shifted. People often underestimate the power of being seen, heard, or supported for even a brief moment. When someone acknowledges your struggle, your effort, or your potential, it creates a ripple effect. That ripple effect doesn't stay in that moment. It expands into how you view yourself, how you approach challenges, how you treat others. One moment can redefine how you show up in your life. And when you start showing up differently, life starts responding differently. Opportunities that felt distant become reachable. Conversations you were afraid to have become possible. Steps you avoided taking suddenly feel inevitable. All because of one simple moment that created enough emotional leverage to move you forward. What makes these moments transformational isn't that they solve everything, it's that they open a door. And once that door is open, you can never go back to who you were before. You've seen something new, something better, something more. You've felt a glimpse of the person you're capable of becoming. And even if the moment was small, the vision it created is huge. That's why transformation often looks quiet from the outside, but feels seismic from the inside. And the most inspiring part is that you never know when one of these moments is about to happen. It could be today. It could be in the middle of an ordinary day that looks just like every other day. It could be in a conversation you didn't plan. It could come from a person you didn't expect. It could be a moment you can't predict or control. But when it arrives, it touches something deep within you, something that's been waiting, something that's ready. And suddenly the world feels different, and so do you, because transformation doesn't wait for permission. It begins the instant your heart is open enough to let a small moment change everything. Experiencing kindness ignites the desire and responsibility to pay it forward, and this happens almost instinctively because when someone touches your life in a moment where you're vulnerable, a moment where you're uncertain, or a moment where you feel like the world has forgotten you, it leaves an imprint that doesn't fade easily. It becomes more than a memory, it becomes a standard, a model, a reminder of the kind of human being you want to be. Kindness doesn't just change the receiver for a day, it changes their internal compass. It awakens something in the heart that says, I want to be that for someone else. And when that awakening happens, it starts to influence decisions, behaviors, and the way you show up in the world. When someone receives kindness during a time when they felt unseen or undervalued, it creates an emotional contrast so strong that they can't forget it. The mind remembers what the body felt, the sense of relief, the sense of gratitude, the sense of being lifted just when things were getting heavy. Those feelings register deeply, and because of that emotional impact, a new sense of responsibility forms, not the responsibility that feels like a burden, but the responsibility that feels like purpose. It's the desire to take what was given to you and let it flow through you to someone else. That's the nature of kindness. It doesn't end with the person who receives it. It moves through them. You start to notice people differently. You become more aware of moments where someone around you might be struggling. You start seeing situations you once overlooked: the person who looks strong but is quietly carrying too much, the person who appears calm but is suppressing fear, the person who smiles while secretly trying not to fall apart. And because you've been in that place, because someone helped you when you didn't ask, your heart becomes tuned to the signals others give out without speaking. Kindness opens your emotional sensitivity. It sharpens your empathy. It expands your capacity to care. You begin to understand that your smallest action might become someone else's turning point. And because you understand that, you no longer underestimate the power you have to make a difference. You realize that sometimes helping someone doesn't require money, doesn't require a grand gesture, doesn't require something dramatic. It might just be a moment of presence, a moment of listening, a moment of encouragement, a moment of giving when no one expects you to. These little choices accumulate, and each one has the potential to shape someone's life the way yours was shaped. And there's something deeply empowering about being part of that chain. When you pay kindness forward, you're not just helping someone else. You're strengthening the part of yourself that was awakened by kindness in the first place. You're reinforcing a new identity. You're telling your mind, this is who I am now. This is the kind of person I choose to be. And every time you act on that instinct, your sense of purpose grows. Purpose doesn't come from some huge mission statement or complicated plan. Purpose grows from choosing to make a difference moment by moment, day by day, and kindness is often the birthplace of that purpose. There's also a ripple effect that goes far beyond what you can see. The person you help might go on to help someone else, and that person might go on to lift another. And the chain continues, sometimes stretching into places you'll never know, touching lives you'll never meet. But the origin of that chain might be a moment that seemed small to you, a moment that came from the kindness you once received. This is how entire communities shift. This is how families evolve. This is how culture changes. One act of kindness creates another, which creates another, and eventually what started as a simple gesture becomes part of someone's legacy. But perhaps the most profound part of paying kindness forward is this: it heals you too. When you give to others the way someone gave to you, you reinforce the belief that goodness exists. You reinforce the belief that you matter. You reinforce the belief that your pain was not meaningless. You begin to see that what once hurt you has now equipped you. What once weakened you now strengthens others. What once made you question yourself now becomes the reason someone else finds courage. Kindness completes a circle inside you. You become grateful not only for the moments you received help, but also for the opportunity to create that moment for someone else. You realize that what was once a wound has become a gift. And the more you give, the more that gift expands. It becomes a part of your identity, your character, your contribution to the world. You carry forward the legacy of the person who helped you, not by obligation, but by choice. And through your actions, someone else learns that kindness is not just a gesture, it's a force that can shape destinies, one human heart at a time. True power comes from giving, serving, and influencing others through compassion. And this truth becomes clearer the more life tests you, the more you grow, and the more you recognize that strength isn't measured by control, dominance, or how much you accumulate, but by how deeply you can impact another person's life in a moment that matters. Many people chase power through achievement, status, or external validation, believing that once they have enough, they'll finally feel powerful. But the kind of power that transforms lives, the kind that leaves a legacy, the kind that creates meaning, has nothing to do with accumulation and everything to do with contribution. Giving shifts something inside you. Serving others expands you. Compassion elevates you into the version of yourself you were always meant to become. There's a unique energy that flows through you when you help someone, not because you have to, not because you want recognition, but because something inside you knows it's the right thing to do. That energy is pure. It's grounding and invigorating at the same time. It aligns your heart and your purpose. When you act from compassion, you tap into a strength that doesn't tire, a strength that doesn't feel forced. Because compassion isn't a transaction, it's an expression of your highest nature. And the moment you begin to influence others through that energy, you discover a version of power that feels limitless. Giving does something to your identity. It tells your mind, I am someone who can create impact. It tells your heart, I matter in the lives of others. It tells your spirit, I am connected to something bigger than myself. Most people think receiving is what fills them, but some of the most fulfilled people in the world are those who consistently give. They've realized that when you give, you're not losing anything, you're expanding your capacity to love, to lead, to show up, to create change. And that expansion becomes part of your character. Serving others isn't about martyrdom or sacrificing your needs. It's about stepping into a state of being where contribution becomes a natural extension of who you are. When you serve, you begin to see people not just for what they show on the surface, but for what they're carrying within. You begin to understand that people don't need perfection. They need presence. They don't need someone to solve everything. They need someone to care, someone to believe in them, someone to remind them of their strength. And when you become that person, your influence grows in ways achievements alone can never replicate. Compassion is often misunderstood as softness or vulnerability, but in truth, compassion requires immense strength. It requires the courage to feel, the willingness to understand, the patience to listen, the humility to show up without judgment. Anyone can be harsh. Anyone can criticize, anyone can focus only on themselves, but it takes a powerful person to connect, to empathize, to lift others when they're struggling. Compassion is the bridge between who you are and the impact you're capable of making. And every time you choose compassion over indifference, your influence deepens. Real influence comes from alignment, when your actions, your intentions, and your values all speak the same language. When you show up consistently in service to others, people feel it. They trust you. They gravitate toward you. They listen to you not because of your title, your resources, or your achievements, but because your heart speaks louder than your words. Influence built on compassion is influence that lasts. It doesn't fade when circumstances change or when people come and go. It leaves an imprint. It becomes a memory people carry, a motivation they draw from, a lesson they pass forward. There's also a profound sense of meaning that grows when you live with the intention to contribute. Meaning isn't found in comfort. Meaning is found in connection. It's found in the lives you touch. It's found in the moments where you choose to rise to a higher standard, even when no one is watching. The more you give, the more meaning you create. The more meaning you create, the more powerful you feel. Because power without meaning is empty, but meaning without power is incomplete. When you combine the two through compassionate action, you create a force that can change not only your life, but the lives of everyone you interact with. The irony is that people often think giving drains them, when in reality, the right kind of giving energizes you. It strengthens your identity, sharpens your purpose, and deepens your resilience. When challenges come, you don't feel alone, you feel connected. When fear shows up, you don't collapse. You rise because you've built a life based on contribution, not consumption. You've built a foundation no one can take from you. Through giving, serving, and influencing with compassion, you step into the version of yourself that is capable of shaping lives, shifting environments, and transforming futures. You become a source of light in a world that often feels dim. And in the process, you discover that true power isn't about being above others. It's about lifting others with you. When you look deeply at life, you start to realize something that doesn't make sense at first. Some of the biggest transformations don't come from massive events, they don't come from dramatic breakthroughs, and they don't come from life-shaking decisions. They come from moments that look ordinary on the outside but feel extraordinary on the inside, moments where someone chooses to care just a little more than necessary, to give just a little more than expected, to step a little further than convenience. And when you witness that level of genuine humanity, something shifts inside you. It's almost like a mirror is held up in front of you, showing you a version of yourself you didn't know was possible. That experience becomes a seed, and once it's planted, it begins to grow in ways you never saw coming. You start to recognize that the smallest decision to care can carry more power than the biggest display of strength. It creates a ripple that goes far beyond the moment itself, far beyond what the giver even realizes. You walk away thinking differently, feeling differently, and ultimately living differently. There's something almost electric about being on the receiving end of sincere kindness. You feel this mixture of gratitude and responsibility rising up in you. Gratitude because someone saw you, really saw you, at a moment when they didn't have to. Responsibility because deep down, you know you've been handed something you can't just keep to yourself. It's like someone passed you a torch, and now it's your turn to carry it forward. You start recognizing opportunities you never saw before, moments where you can be that person for someone else, moments where you can interrupt a stranger's struggle, moments where you can add warmth to a cold situation. And what's incredible is that the more you give, the more you awaken something powerful within yourself. You realize you're not just helping others, you're reshaping your own identity. You're becoming someone who doesn't just talk about making a difference, but actually does it. And that shift in identity becomes the engine for everything that comes next. The truth is, people underestimate their influence every day. They underestimate the impact of their tone, their presence, their attention, their compassion. They think they need to have money, power, or status to shift the course of someone's life. But the person who once received that small act of kindness already knows better. They know it's not about having more resources. It's about having more intention. It's about being awake to the world instead of walking through it numb. It's about choosing to take ownership of the energy you bring into every room, every interaction, every relationship. And once you understand this, once you internalize the fact that you can influence someone's direction with the simplest gesture, you stop waiting for perfect conditions to make an impact. You start looking for the smallest openings. You start understanding that even tiny choices, your smile, your encouragement, your patience, your presence, can alter another person's day, maybe even their future. And something even deeper happens when you live this way. You begin to trust your own ability to shape your life. Because if you can influence others through small but meaningful actions, then you can influence yourself the same way. You can set small intentions, take small steps, make small decisions that gradually build into unstoppable momentum. You begin to realize that greatness isn't built through giant leaps. It's built through tiny moments of alignment over and over again. You learn that the same kindness you offer others becomes the kindness you need to offer yourself. The same compassion you extend outward becomes the foundation you stand on inward. And the same belief you spark in others becomes the belief that fuels your own growth. So that one small act of kindness doesn't just change the receiver. Over time, it changes the giver, and then it changes everyone the giver touches. It becomes a chain reaction of empathy, strength, and transformation, a living example of how one moment can echo through countless lives. And eventually, you recognize that you're not just part of the chain. You're now a link that strengthens it, expands it, and passes it forward in a way that keeps the ripple alive long after the original moment has passed.